Hello, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. October often turns our thoughts towards spooky things and monsters, and so for one of my videos this month I thought that I would talk about the scariest of Old Norse monsters, the Aptrganga, or Afterwalker, the Norse equivalent of a zombie. Now, the word Aptrganga does literally mean afterwalker or again walker. The second element, ganga, is from the root ganga, to walk, and after is a word, of course, related to the English word after. It typically means again in Old Norse, so again walker might be a better literal translation. The afterwalker is created when a man dies under certain conditions, and these conditions can vary from case to case, but some of the big warning signs include dying sitting upright, dying with your eyes open, dying disappointed in your son, or dying in your own house, dying not outdoors doing something. So we see a lot of common behaviors among these afterwalkers, including the practices of riding cattle and terrifying cattle, sometimes killing cattle, also often riding on houses and other structures on the roof, and also often coming back and, quote, riding their wives, and often eventually killing them with their large appetite for undead activities. Well, many sagas do feature these creatures, and one that features a long episode about an afterwalker is Aptrganga saga. This has been translated by Herman Paulson and Paul Edwards into English. I believe their translation is actually just called Aptrganga saga. This was also translated back in the ancient days of English translations into the saga of the ear dwellers, ear being a literal English cognate of the Old Norse word oir. And somewhat late in that saga, there is an individual named Thorolf Lameleg who is a thoroughgoing just troublemaker. He's a notorious thumper and just a nasty piece of work. And late in his life, he's very old, he's lame in the leg because of a provocation he gave someone earlier in his life. He goes to his son Arnkel and he tries to get him to help him rob a neighbor of theirs. Arnkel won't do it, so Thorolf is really disappointed and he goes back to his home, and while he is sitting upright at his dinner table, he dies with his eyes open. So he's got all four of these classic warning signs. He's disappointed in his son, his eyes are open, he's sitting upright, and he's at his own house. So Arnkel finds out about this and comes over to his father's house and approaches the body from behind and comes up to the body and puts some clothes over the head and eyes. It doesn't say what kind of clothes, but presumably to cover the eyes, and then drags the body backwards out of the house, not through a door, but by knocking a wall out, perhaps reflecting a belief that afterwalkers, like some traditional ideas about vampires, can't go in through a door that they haven't been admitted through after death. The body is already very heavy, unusually heavy, and he has a team of steers drag it to a spot where he buries his father in a mound, and unfortunately, straight after dying at night, Thorolf begins to come back, causing trouble. He terrifies cattle, rides cattle, kills cattle. Cattle that graze too near to his burial mound are soon found dead. Birds that land on his burial mound are found dead. And there is a sheep herder in the area who complains about being chased by Thorolf, until one day he is found dead. All of his sheep lost or dead, and the sheep herder himself has every bone in his body broken, small and large. Now, he comes back also to the house where he once dwelled and visits his wife with his undead attentions. This eventually drives her crazy and she dies as well. And after dark, some men who have been killed by Thorolf are also seen to walk with him as afterwalkers themselves. Arnkel gets tired of this, goes and drags the body from its burial mound and finds him undecomposed. This is a common trope with afterwalkers, as well as with traditional ideas about vampires in Eastern Europe, and bloated. And he has a new team of steers drag the body to a new burial mound further inland. But the steers basically give up, they break loose, they run astray, and they end up dying while they're running wild, and the body is so heavy and so swollen that Arnkel and his men can't lift Thorolf anymore, and so they just rebury him right where the steers dropped him. This stops the depredations of Thorolf for as long as Arnkel is alive, but Arnkel himself eventually dies, and then Thorolf goes right back to his old zombie habits. As soon as he dies, there's a man named Thorod in the area who had had some unpleasant dealings with both Thorolf and Arnkel when they were both alive. He decides he's going to do something about this. He rides down to the burial mound, the new one, where Thorolf Lameleg is, digs him up, and finds him not only undecomposed and swollen as big as an ox, but blår som hell, literally blue as hell. And I do insist that blår means blue, although some scholars translate that as black. What exactly blue as hell means is, a little bit more open to interpretation. Perhaps this reflects the bluish or indigo color that some decomposing bodies can take, even though supposedly the body is relatively undecomposed. They roll the body down to the beach and they burn it in a huge bonfire, although it takes a long time for the body to even light on fire. And then the ashes are thrown into the ocean, but some of them are carried by the wind to a rock where one of Thorod's cows licks the ashes up. She is later seen in the company of a bull no one has seen before, and before long she gives birth to a bull calf. She dies giving birth to it, but this bull calf is huge and soon grows up at a much greater rate than other bulls normally do. Now, Thorod's old blind foster mother warns him when she hears the terrifyingly loud moos of this little bull calf that he's got a monster on his hand. She says that is a troll's voice, and she warns that it will cause disaster for the family and ought to be killed. Thorod ignores her. He kills another calf to shut her up, and then he just hides this one in a barn and names it Glacier, so like glossy. Now, before long, the old woman hears the distinctive, terrifying moos of Glossy again, continues her warnings, but Thorod continues to ignore her, till Glossy is grown up, and one day in a rain shower, Glossy takes to tearing up Thorod's haystacks. Thorod runs down to Glossy the bull with a big log in his hands, and he slams the log between the horns of Glossy, but it shatters, and then he finds himself in a wrestling match with this bull. His men run out to help him with their spears, but before they can get to him, he is gored by the bull, by one of its horns. It goes into his chest. His men chase after it, but they watch as Glossy jumps into a swamp and sinks into the swamp, never to be seen again. And sure enough, they come home and find Thorod himself has dragged himself to his bed and died of the wound given to him by the bull. This is far from the only occasion in which there is a afterwalker in one of the Icelandic sagas. For instance, even the pretty famous and often read Laxdala saga, Saga of the People of Laxdal, has an afterwalker in it. But this is by far the most detailed and interesting account of an afterwalker in any of Norse literature. Truly the most terrifying of the supernatural monsters that one might have nightmares about encountering in Viking Age Scandinavia. For now, I am sitting here in National Forest in Colorado, and I continue to make these videos that I hope are entertaining and easy to watch thanks to the nice backgrounds. And I hope that if you enjoy all of this free information, that you'll consider donating to my Patreon, or perhaps checking out my translations of the Poetic Edda, or of the Saga of the Volsungs and the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok. And from beautiful Colorado, I will wish you all the best.